Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a new episode of the Metal Meltdown. Just one little itsy bitsy teensy weensy fucking reminder before we officially get started talking about this new Dee Snider solo album. I will be showing off my entire vinyl collection live this coming Sunday, August 1st. We're gonna basically spend an entire afternoon looking at some cool-ass vinyl records, shooting the shit, maybe sharing some drinks, and who knows where the night goes. Maybe we'll do some other stuff. I don't fucking know. Also, you're gonna see my face. You never see that during the streams. That's new. That's different. Wow. I wonder how this will change the dynamic. I'm running out of filler things to say. You don't even have to go too far. The stream will be right here on the Metal Meltdown YouTube channel. Hell, I'll even put the link to it in the description of this video so you can mark it on your calendar. We go live at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, if you're interested. If not, I guess go fuck yourself. Have fun having a really boring Sunday not spent with me. Your call, but I would spend it with me. I'm a cool guy. I do cool things. Dee Snider, the legendary lead singer for 80s hard rock crew Twisted Sister, is back with a brand new solo album, his first following 2018's surprise hit, For the Love of Metal. An album which saw Snider finally fully embrace the worlds of heavy metal, groove metal, and thrash metal with some killer vocal performances, some strong riffs, and some great collaborations with members of Hatebreed, Killswitch Engage, Arch Enemy, Toxic Holocaust, and many more. And I'm not trying to kiss ass or nothing, folks. I 100% mean it. It was a seriously good fucking album, quite possibly the best thing he has made outside of Twisted Sister. And with all this in mind, I was actually weirdly kind of excited for Leave a Scar. I was genuinely curious to see what other kinds of collaborations would be concocted and presented on this album. I was genuinely interested to see how Dee would refine or perhaps expand upon the sound For the Love of Metal. But now that I've spent a pretty respectable amount of time with Leave a Scar, I can't help but feel somewhat underwhelmed by what's on display here. This is a much more simplistic and derivative record in comparison to For the Love of Metal. There aren't quite as many twists and turns, and it seems as though the novelty of Dee Snider working with the likes of Jamey, Jasta, and other metal gods has worn off a little bit. It doesn't refine or expand on the things that made For the Love of Metal such a strong record. In fact, it kind of just settles for delivering a lot of the same tired hard rock and heavy metal tropes that you've heard hundreds if not thousands of times by now, not just from Dee Snider or Twisted Sister, but from a multitude of other aging rock and metal artists. You know, it's a lot of very formulaic four-chord boomer dad rock songs about never giving up and being a badass and, oh, remember the good old days of rock and roll? Oh man, I gotta rock, 'cause I'm a rocker, man. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's still plenty of fun to be had with this. There are a handful of genuinely really good songs, the album is consistently very energetic and rambunctious, and Dee Snider himself sounds fantastic. There's a youthful vigor and enthusiasm and anger to his performance that you just don't really hear from a lot of other older rock and metal singers. The track Before I Go has like the classic heavy metal sheen and aura of like vintage late 70s, early 80s Judas Priest with one of the strongest choruses on the entire album. There's also Down But Never Out, which is a little bit more rambunctious and volatile with some groove-laden thrashy riffs, some more ferocious vocals from Dee, and some really fun backing vocals from Jamey Jasta of Hatebreed. These ferocious, hardcore-tinged backing vocals, coupled with some genuinely pretty ferocious thrash riffery and a pretty fucking gnarly breakdown, makes for some seriously heavy fun. Expanding on those thrashier influences, you have a track like The Reckoning, which closes out the record and is one of the few genuine surprises on this thing, almost sounding like a modern Testament song, but with Dee Snider on vocals. And of course, there's also my favorite track on the record, Crying for Your Life, a genuinely pretty dark, moody, and theatrical cut that sees Dee Snider hearkening to the glory days of mid-80s Ronnie James Dio. But unfortunately, as strong as these tracks are, they only really make up a third of the album, the other two-thirds of which are dominated by some pretty forgettable and formulaic kind of gritty hard rock and some genuinely pretty cringeworthy material that shows Dee Snider at his absolute worst. You've got I Gotta Rock Again, for instance, which is one of the most pathetically corny pieces of boomer rock I think I've heard in a while. You've also got tracks like Silent Battles and In for the Kill, which are some of the most formulaic, cookie-cutter kind of heavy metal hard rock I've heard all year. They are so bland, so flavorless, so uninteresting, and so ultimately predictably forgettable as a result of it. There's also the track Open Season, which shows Dee Snider, a 66-year-old man, not so hilariously firing back at the, as he directly puts it, pathetic troll losers of blabbermouth.net. Call me crazy if you like, folks, but I think it's kind of ridiculous that Dee Snider, a gentleman who has been in the public spotlight for nearly 40 years and has performed professionally for even longer, suddenly can't handle the tantrums of anonymous people online. Like, come on, Snider. You're an adult. Fucking act like it. And then there's Time to Choose, the only major collaboration on the album, which itself is a bit of a bummer because For the Love of Metal was cram-packed with so many awesome guest performers, but whatever. This track sees Dee Snider collaborating with Corpse Grinder, George Fisher of Cannibal Corpse fame, and I promise you that that is not as interesting in execution as it sounds in theory. George is very unwisely acting as Dee's hype man in this track, just kind of growling and belching and snarling in the background. He's really not doing anything to bring this track to life or to give it some extra depth and sonic flavor. He's just kind of repeatedly growling, "Time to choose! Time to choose!" His vocals just end up being really distracting, and it makes this track feel awkward and clumsy, like the sonic equivalent to Mom just told me it's my turn to play Xbox. Yeah, it's a pretty fucking mixed bag, to put it bluntly. I'll go with a 2.5 out of 5, leaning towards a 2 out of 5. It's a mostly unimpressive display of generic, formulaic, hard rock and heavy metal with some strong performances and some strong cuts sprinkled all the way through, but not to the point where I think anyone will be talking about this in the way we talked about For the Love of Metal, or even in the way we've talked about a lot of other killer heavy metal from 2021 so far. If you're an older rock metal listener who's just looking for some big dumb riffs and shit, good for you. I'm sure you'll have fun with this. I'm happy that you like Reheated Leftovers and Vanilla Ice Cream and Missionary Sex. Good for you. But I like to get funky, and For the Love of Metal, despite being ultimately somewhat formulaic, had enough funky twists and turns and spices that I was still pretty invested in it. But this, not so much. And the few that are on display aren't necessarily great. 2.5 out of 5, it's okay, I guess. I don't know. That's it. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be, so what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe right here so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately, in case you somehow aren't already. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.